Cool. So I think with this meeting today, Jim is away and traveling. He was going to try to call in, but was questionable. Jake got married on Saturday, and so he's honeymooning somewhere. Yeah. And then Ken is out this evening, and I think that's who I was aware of. And so I think the rest of us are here, and we're going to see if Sal or Jeanette can join us. So I think with this,
I just heard from Jeanette. She's on a call that's sort of going much longer than she expected, but hopefully she'll join later.
Okay. All right. So Maureen, you get to facilitate tonight. So
yeah. Well, I guess I get to turn it over right back to you, right, Josh?
Yes. Mission moment. Tonight's mission moment is about gratitude. Sarah, we want to thank you for everything you've done for our school over the past 2+ years. I've enjoyed working, doing so many fronts, and you've contributed to our school in lasting ways. As I kind of jogged my brain today and thought about things that I appreciate about what you've brought to our school. Obviously, our work back with the renewal after our first term was successful and a joy, and I think it brought you to our team a real way. So I'm grateful for that. Some of the work that we've done over the past year or two around meeting structure and how we best use our time as a team on these calls and then during committee calls, I think has been improved due to your input and your recommendations. And so I thank you for that. I'm also thinking about just like our ongoing work with how I report out and provide kind of assessment data to team in meaningful ways. And so I think we've made progress in that, and that continues and will continue. So I thank you for that. And then I think even more recently with some of the factor work we've done with this very complex matter with reopening and the way in which we think about this in strategic ways. We're going to talk about that tonight, but I think that was furthered due to your ideas. And so I thank you for being super consistent on the team, being thoughtful, being smart as hell, and providing the right push while all the way also providing the right level of support, which aligns with just who we are as a school and our mission. So thank you so much for your contributions over the past 2 years. Wish you well. I know you won't be a stranger, and we look forward to making you proud.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you from all of us. I think as we've said a lot, we all have different skill sets, and you definitely had a lot of skills that the rest of us didn't have, or at least people like me didn't have. So thanks a lot.
All the best to you, Sarah.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we move on to head of school report. And so I'm going to focus on 2 items and 2 updates during this portion of the meeting. The first is just about returning to school, and so this has been something we've talked about intensively over the past 2 meetings, 3 meetings, 4 meetings, and we opened. And so school opened last week. We've got students now taking part in classes. We're fully in it. And so we had kids taking a full day of classes today. We had leaders doing rounds and in classrooms and like thinking about practice. It feels good. It feels like a very genuine building from where we were in the spring and making moves forward. So I'm pleased. Of course, there are challenges and things we're figuring out, but I do feel as if some of the decisions we made back in late July with how we open were smart ones and safe ones, and allow for us to think about the work and do so without being exposed to lots of complexities that might get in the way of thinking squarely about teaching and learning. So I'm feeling good about that. And so I think what I put forth now is I mentioned in this report some areas where there's information pending. Now that we're opening and now that where the doors are open and kids are in, how are we doing? Like, how is this plan working? And so we're only a couple of days in, so the information is still in pencil and still forming. We'll have a better sense of things at the end of this week and into next week, but I'm beginning to kind of form some early observations and priorities based on where we are. And so enrollment wise, I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. But enrollment really good in some grades, under enrolled in other grades. 6th and 10th grade were under enrolled. Overall, it puts us in a place where we're slightly below budget. And so we've got some work to do there as we engage kids in what I feel is a promising program and better than a lot of the other programs that schools are offering. So there's work to do on our end with gaining the attention of families and kids who might feel a certain bit of uncertainty around their school and what's going on, and saying, hey, look, we've got a model that's promising, that's worked for us in the past, and it's rigorous, it's safe, and it might be an ideal model for you as a family. And so I'll say a bit more about some of the moves we're making with that right now, but I'd say that's something which is on my mind this month.
Josh, sorry to interrupt. Jeanette is trying to get in. Somebody
Excellent.
needs to...
You got it. Yeah, there she is. Thank you. So in addition to that, with regard to access, I'm feeling good about that, and families having what they need to engage. We're probably at 97% at this point in time. We're tracking that data, and for us, it's going to be about, like, there's always going to be repairs and troubleshooting to do, and us getting really good at, like, the turnaround time on that. So having an inventory of technology, and then being responsive and figuring out who needs technology and how to get to it most quickly. And so I think it's about continuing to improve on some of our promising protocols for that in the spring, so that, like, we're not at 97, we're at 99% or better. Around attendance right now, I think attendance has been as strong as it was in the spring. We are taking a more robust approach to, like, attendance. And so looking at period by period attendance and how many kids are there for the full day as opposed to a partial day is something we're looking at now, which we didn't do as much of in the spring when tabulating attendance in the way that we did according to DOE and state recommendations. So I look forward to sort of utilizing that data to figure out exactly how many kids are with us all day, some periods, less than some periods, and how we then encourage them and set the right policies and expectations in place so that, like, kids are engaging in school all day as if they were in person, all of our kids. Around number 4, if you look at, I'm looking at table 1, the first table on the bottom of page 1 into page 2. The other pending issue was around number 4, what's called staff orientation. It's a typo. That should say class instruction, regarding increased rigor and engagement for all. This is just about us getting better at teaching and learning remotely so that all of our kids are appropriately challenged and engaged in the work. And so the work there is around teacher quality and promoting that and pushing that and supporting that, and leaders being in classrooms to sort of gauge and provide feedback in the moment or after class to help teachers improve on some of those skills that are most meaningful to rigor. Questioning, for example, or engagement, the way in which you call on students and ensure that all voices are at the table. So that's sort of pending right now. But even this morning during an instructional leadership teaming at the high school, that was the focus of the conversation after rounds, which was, okay, what were some of the bright spots with engagement, and where are some areas where we can insert ourselves more to promote more of that. And then finally, with diagnostic testing, that's happening this week at the middle school for ELA and math, and at the high school in the coming 2 weeks. And so we should have good data on baseline where kids are using an external measure for reading and writing and conceptual math understanding. So that's where things are at this point in time, which is a little bit further along than when I wrote this initially. So are there questions there about so far what I've said about returning to school and our opening plan?
Josh, what's been your feedback from families about what they wanted? Like, are people getting what they wanted? Is anybody sending their kids to kind of study hall, for lack of a better word? Like, how's that all working?
Yeah, so I think right now, second day of class at the high school. And so things that are coming up are like, if there's troubleshooting, it's around kind of getting into class and having the right Zoom code, or making sure you've got kind of the right technology. And so for 23 families that we've counted, getting them a hotspot so they have access to the internet so they can then use their laptops. Those are things that are kind of going on the troubleshooting end of things.
Yeah.
For me, again, like people feel as if I think there's a sense of like the word I used last Wednesday in the SLC meeting was people feel secure. Like they've known this plan for some time. The communication has been fairly consistent across the board. We haven't changed things up. We've only kind of added new pieces of communication or new information to the mix that then allows for families to onboard rather stress-free to remote learning and a continuation of what we did this spring. So I think overall people feel like they feel fortunate. I think that's in comparison to maybe some of the unknowns in other schools where schools are weighing options and rethinking things, perhaps haven't opened. I think there's a feeling of comfort there.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't mention challenges. I'll mention that now. And so there were a couple of challenges that were pressing as of last week where there have been some resolutions. And so I'll mention those now. And so I talked to the SLC about a recent change in leadership at the high school in the science department, and that obviously causing some need to double down and figure that out. And so that's been resolved. And we've moved one of our veteran chemistry teachers who's done some leadership work at a prior school to a position of leadership in the interim as a science chair. And then we've hired on someone who I think is quite promising to take her role in teaching chemistry and AP Bio in the coming year. So I feel as if we've been able to address that well, given the timing in the year. And I do think our kids will be in good care. The other was just around the sort of timing of things. There's a lot going on. All schools are facing that, even with a somewhat relatively smooth opening for us. There are things that we want to take part in and want to provide our families with that take time. And so I'm finding like some of these things are taking more time than what I had wanted or expected. And so, for example, us opening up a safe center for online learning for some of our kids. Originally, I'd hoped that happened at the end of September. Now it looks like something like that happens in mid-October. Right now, we're focusing on like getting teaching and learning and remote learning right. That's like the core focus. That's going to take some time. And then I want to begin to use our teams within to begin planning out and creating like what a safe space for a small number of students who could be struggling at home might look like in our school, and how we do that according to CDC guidelines and other guidelines that are required of us, and that makes sense. Similarly, doing some enrichment on the weekends, like that's going to take a little more time than what I imagined. And so just moving some of that out so that we're focusing on first things first is, I think, the right thing to do, but it's like you want to do it all. So I think we're showing a bit more discipline than we may have in the past in making sure that we get things right. And nail the things that matter most, and then add on once that's done. And so anyway, we're weighing that. I feel good about the project management of that and feel like we're making good decisions along the way, given some of the unknowns, but it's a struggle. So I think those are the things that were on my mind as of last week or recently that we're working through or have worked through already. The other piece here, the other update I want to provide and just kind of like underline is just some of the complexities with the things that our alumni are going through in their first few weeks of college. And so kids have begun class, many remotely who had not signed up for that but are doing so. And so they may be at home taking part in classes when they had thought they'd be on campus. Other kids are on campus and doing just fine. And so depending on the campus model and what schools decided was best for their students and faculty and community, our kids are experiencing different things. And it's not what initially was expected. And so that then throws just more complications into the mix. And so we have had some students who have altered their plans due to campuses changing up their plans. And so in a couple of cases, some students deferring to the spring. And saying, look, I'm paying this money right now. It doesn't make sense. I want the whole real deal college experience. And so pause. I'm going to stay here and then go back to school in the spring. Risky. Like ideally we want all of our kids in school at once right now and be safe in doing so. But that's not the case. And I understand some of these decisions being weighty for families. And so we've been there to support them and been there as a consultant to counsel. But there have been changes in plans. We've had at least one student opt out and come home, and a couple of students who have moved from like a 4-year option to a 2-year option. One of those students moving back to a 4-year option in the spring, and that seat being kept for them. But those are some of the things coming up that I think just hard for families, hard for kids, and you hate to see that, particularly in cases where many of our kids are first-generation college-going students. So I bring that up. I do think that our kids are fortunate to have our college alumni success counselor in the mix and being able to sort of be there for families, be there for kids. In some cases, like call a kid up and say, wait, you've got to do this, or make sure you do this before changing your plans. Communicating with families to let them know about what options they have available to them, talk through some of the complexities of planning and such. Ensure that, like, if kids leave and defer, that their seats are not in jeopardy of being lost. Those things are coming up, and so we do have a person who is working with our families to support them through these things. So I feel good about the support we're providing, and this is still really hard. It's kind of the headline there. Trudy, I don't know if you'd add anything to the mix, given that you've got a son who's experiencing this and then friends who are experiencing some of this too.
I have some, there are some that are home, and it's a little frustrating. There are, are they being there? They do, the kids feel like they're not having a normal college experience, but nothing is normal anymore. And it is, you do weigh out some options. You do get to the point where you don't know if every month they keep pushing it back. I think with Tariq's school, they keep pushing it back a month further, and they're just weighing it out now. So it gets to be frustrating. And then you have this air hanging over you of, at any point you could be sent home. At any point they could just say, pack up everything and everybody go home. Yeah. So it's pretty frustrating, but what can we do? Mm-hmm. I do think that you guys have a good team. The team, CCR team, they've helped me with that. When you have a kid that doesn't really, they feel overwhelmed, and they've been really helpful to kind of grab me and say, hey, this is what he's not doing. And this is what he needs to do. So, she just helped him add a class. He wanted to drop a class, and she helped him choose the next class to add. And that's without even letting me know. So they speak to the students directly.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions or comments about transition to college from other members of the team? Sarah, Jeanette, anything we talked about on Wednesday that's worth bringing up here?
No, I think you hit the big point.
Cool. So that then is the update that I put forward from this monthly report.
All right, I had muted myself, so I think that takes us to the dashboard review, and we're clear. I think we started late and we're running behind, so make it as quick as you'd like. Sure. Josh.
So I think there are just two general updates coming from the dashboard. One is financial, and it's very early in the financial year, so there aren't any significant updates there. And Leslie will join us at 7:45 to provide a more formal update. So that was one update, and the other was with enrollment that I touched on. Right now, we've got better data earlier in the year than we ever have, and we're in touch with families very closely. And so on day 2 of school, we had identified at the middle school about a half dozen kids who had decided for various reasons to not enroll in Unity. About half those kids were moving out of state: Maryland, Florida, Connecticut, I don't remember the other. And then a child going to private school, one going to a neighboring CMO, no, 2 going to neighboring CMOs. And so there's movement right now. And so some of this happens each and every year. I imagine it's logical that there's going to be more of this than what we've seen in the past, but it's hard to gauge right now. We're still kind of gathering data. I don't have good high school data right now because we're only in day 2 of the year. We know which kids didn't show up over the past 2 days, and we've been reaching out to them, but there isn't concrete data to show that there's a similar drop at the high school with regard to enrollment. So a few surprises with the 6th grade. We're over-enrolled in the 7th and 8th grade. We're over-enrolled in the 11th and 12th grade. We're under-enrolled in the 10th grade by about 10 students, and we're within 10 in the 9th grade. And remember, we got a big 9th grade cohort, so I believe we've got 93 kids in the 9th grade right now with room for 100. So that's sort of the update right now. I think the work we're doing revolves around social media, both like outreach, like families clicking, saying, wow, this is interesting school. Let me like find out more. And then us following up. And so our 6th grade or middle school counselor, like having an eye on that, becoming an expert in some of these social media platforms, and then knowing exactly how to then engage with families afterward. And so, for example, over the weekend, there were about 15 sort of families that said, I'm interested in this school. We have that information, and we can now kind of like begin to engage and reach out to families who have said, hey, I'm interested in learning more. So that outreach happening, and then the other outreach happening internally with just referrals from both families, saying, families, we've got a couple of spots in the 6th grade. You're happy at our school. Let others know what we're offering and what's out there. And then doing that with staff too, where, you know, a vast majority of our staff live in central Brooklyn and are community members of communities where our kids also live. So those are our main moves right now. The goal right now is to get up to from 528 back up to 535 in the coming week, and then make progress from there. I believe in our team. This is a pretty solid kind of recruitment team as far as things go. So they're going to make the right moves to ensure that we're providing ample options for our kids who may not be at our school to then enroll. And so that's the work right now that is happening on the recruitment enrollment front. Are there questions?
Yeah, I think, I mean, part of me wants to say, you know, yet again, we can't figure out, and we're missing our target, which is frustrating. On the other hand, this year seems like it's kind of, you know, probably nobody's hitting their targets. So, and I don't know what you could have planned in advance to make this go better.
2 things come to mind for me. I think one is that we want to reach out to some other schools to see if they're experiencing the same thing. I had mentioned earlier that a couple of like well-known CMOs are also very actively recruiting, and so you'll pop up. So that shows that they have
trading up, like they're trying to see if there's spots freeing up in the fancy private schools and everything. I mean, I think that's just that's universal.
Yep. And then I think the other, so that's one. What was the other idea you mentioned? So I think the only other thing that we could have done in retrospect was just like say, all right, our goal right now, like in June, we had a goal to enroll by 105%. And that was based on some prior data. And so in retrospect, maybe we should have upped that to 110% and sort of said, all right, we'll cap there. At the same time, we would have only been able to do that. I would have felt confident doing that, or least susceptible to over-enrolling and being like, we have a problem of over-enrollment in our hands in the 6th and 9th grade. So maybe in retrospect, the move would have been 110 in 6th and 9th, 105 where else.
Yeah, or a variety of numbers depending on where your past experience, right? Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's we've got again, this team is good. They hustle, like they get after it in terms of like reaching out to families and connecting with them, and they're engaging. Good team. I do feel what's on our side is that like school is up and running right now. Like we have things going on, so we have to like connect with those families who are frustrated because their kids have been home for a few days and things are getting rough.
Yeah.
No.
And maybe Maybe when the district schools start next week, it's going to be a mess, and some people are going to be looking at other options or whatever.
Yeah. So that's we don't wish that on anyone, but we're going to make sure that the word is out that like we're up and running and school is solidly in session right now, and there are full days of synchronous remote learning going on. Your kid will be safe, and what's your address? We'll get you the technology you need. Let's go. And that's the messaging. So that's one. Those are the two updates for the dashboard this week. And it's we'll have more updates from other areas of the school next month, but we're 5 days in the school.
Okay. All right. So that's it. Should we move on to the strategic planning?
Yeah.
Josh?
And what I thought was a good use of our time here tonight with strategic planning was to talk about something that the SLC focused on Wednesday, which was a continuation of some of our discussions around like thinking forward about most important factors at play in making important decisions in 2021, given pandemic, given complexities of the year, and then thinking about like what factors might be at play in helping us make clear, informed decisions about returning to in-person instruction when it's safe to do so. So I'm going to share my screen. And what I'd like to do is present some of the thinking done over the past month based on our collective thinking last month, and then some back and forth with key people in the SLC, along with a few other conversations on the side about those factors that seem to be in play most in making good decisions this year, including decisions about when to return to in-person instruction. And so you're going to see a table in front of you with lots of stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the table top to bottom and talk you through the factors and the way they're organized. And the question I'd like to come to the team is one that I also posed out to the SLC, which is like, in terms of like factors at play, do these seem like the right factors? And would you propose any additional factors, or within the factors here, would you propose considerations that might make this even stronger as a guiding document? This is not meant to be an algorithm. It's meant to just be sort of a palette of like, here are things in play and making some really complex decisions about what's best for community and schooling kids. So up at the top of the page, I've listed 3 external factors to the school. And so those are the guidance we receive from state and what the governor says and what the state education department says. And so that's a very, very real sort of determinant of what we do and what we're permitted to do. In addition to that, other factors at play include what some of the other charters in New York City are doing, some of the CMOs are doing, who've got lots of kind of people thinking about this and lots of brain power. And so we want to take that in consideration as we think about what's best for our school too. And then the DOE, similarly, like what are they doing? What are they thinking about with regard to how to make the best of this year, given some of the complexities? And then what are they thinking about when determining when might be the right time to return to school? So those are factors that I think we have no control over, but that come into play that inform our decision making. Any questions there?
Yeah, I do. Are number 1 and number 3 binding on you, or are they things that you choose to look at?
1 would be binding because we're authorized by the state.
Yeah.
I would say 3 is important at the middle school with facilities.
Yeah.
Most directly. But we've got more autonomy to perhaps do some things that we are, right? Like we made some decisions that don't align directly with what the DOE is attempting to do. But we are limited to like when we can get in the building on Shroop and Monroe. And that's DOE supervised.
And those are factors, right? So they're things you look at. There's no rule saying like they have to be one way or the other. I mean, except, obviously you need to comply with what the state tells you to do, but sort of you could end up making a different decision than some of the CMOs are.
Yeah. And we have, I mean, the CMOs, not all CMOs have acted in unison here. And so, for example, Success Academy began hybrid in July. That was the plan. And then they came out a week and a half ago or so and said, we're going to be now remote fully through December 31st. And so that's one scenario of what schools have done. And there are others who are doing things slightly differently. But I'm finding the trend being that CMOs are moving toward remote if they're moving.
Including for the younger kids, or you're not really looking at that?
I think it's, I don't know if others would have more insight than I, but I think that hybrid is still being provided. I do know of a few schools that have started that up, and they might be independent spaces. I'm not certain, but I know it'd be easier to pull that off. But there are a sample of schools that have moved to remote after considering hybrid earlier over the summer.
Okay.
To go back to your original question, though, yeah, I think you're right in that, like, the state guidelines are the state guidelines. Like, that's really what they say we would have to do. But I think numbers 2 and 3 here are more about, like, just getting a pulse and maybe asking, why are they doing what they're doing, and are those considerations also applicable to us?
Yeah, fair enough. There's things where you're in the same basket and some where you might be different.
If there was a number 4, maybe it'd be interesting to look to see what private schools are doing, but they're in kind of a different bin because of just a different set of resources they may have.
Space, everything else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that it's worth looking at here because I think it's kind of subsumed in 1 through 3, but I think at some point you'd want to look at sort of CDC guidance and all sorts of things about sort of how human beings are advised to interact generally. But presumably that would be reflected in kind of primarily 1 and 3.
Right on. Yep. So that's external. We move into kind of internal factors and school performance factors. And so this for me is like, how are we doing with our school year? And most of these could be applied to how we were providing schooling in 2019-20 or now. It's irrelevant, but these are things that matter to, like, what we see is what kids then experience and get out of our school. And so there are 6 indicators here that I've listed. There could be more, but these are prioritized in my mind and are bigger in perhaps weight. So access is just tech access. Like, are we ensuring that kids have what they need to engage in school? If not, that's a problem. Stop there. Let's fix that. They need access, particularly if we're going remote. So I've set some targets here, and then this is coming from some of, again, the input of team last month, where, like, there are just some different gradations of what is good, what needs improvement, and what's a major concern. And so for us, we want for almost all of our kids to have technology at any point in time, understanding there's going to be some troubleshooting and repairs that have to happen. And that's something we're gauging. So we've got data on it, and we look at that on a weekly basis at the senior leadership level, and then it's happening within the operations teams more frequently. So that's one example. Attendance, obviously another. If kids are not showing up, that's a problem. Pause, stop there. We've got to fix that. And so I've offered a range there of what I think is strong attendance, what is in need of improvement, isn't a red flag, but, like, we can do better. And then red flag in terms of, like, wait, this doesn't seem right. Something's wrong. Is this a structural issue? What's going on here? And sort of indications for those things. Those are also being tracked on a daily basis right now, and then a weekly basis as we move forward and compose weeks. So the same can be said for participation in class. We do have participation grades in class that are happening daily that are a reflection of, like, kids showing engagement, demonstrating that. Course pass rates, our internal assessment rates and results. External, which for this year is like one external measure that we're using and administering 3 times a year, I mentioned that we're administering them this week at the middle school for ELA and math, but for external, like the indicators being, is there positive growth? Is there no growth or negative growth? And like, that's telling, like that's going to inform our decisions about what changes or improvements we make, question whether we're doing the right things in a remote setting, and also give us a sense of like, hey, where can we change things up and make things better? So going back to the Safe Center for Online Learning, for example, if we saw that like for some of our kids, like this isn't working, this schooling from home isn't the best model for them. And if we then are able to sort of set up a space in the school, socially distanced with masks, disinfected, the whole bit, like following all those guidelines, would the in-person for a subset of our kids who so struggle in remote perhaps be beneficial to them? So, you know, that's how I'm using this sort of palette to make decisions over time, given data that we collect and monitor with regularity. The final piece here about the quality of teaching. Go ahead.
So, what do you do currently if somebody doesn't have access? Do you have a way of getting them printed materials or something, or do you just rush to get them access as soon as possible?
It's more of the like right now, like, so for example, what a common occurrence might be, my camera's not working on my laptop, something's wrong with it, and therefore I can't sort of like be viewed, but I can engage and be on the screen and see it. Or my laptop is broken, something happened to it, water was spilled on it, I need a new one. Okay, we'll get you a new one. Let's figure this out. And in the meantime, maybe they're using a phone.
Okay.
And that's the more common occurrence. We don't have many kids who just like out, no laptop, no nothing, no technology, or zero Wi-Fi. In some cases, we've had kids who may go to a relative's house because Wi-Fi is spotty, and they'll then engage in work there. So that's more common in what's coming up with tech issues and access issues.
Okay.
So I think beyond that, the last factor internally around performance is really about class observation and using our rubric and saying, all right, this is where we want to be in all of our classrooms as of the end of September, early October. Is this happening? Are we seeing this? Yes, no, maybe. Just another factor that I think is important in combination with all these other things. If all of these are green, school is good. School is going well. If some of these are in yellow, we're working on those things. And that's what's going to be the case. That's always the case. We're always looking to kind of get better at things, and there are going to be challenges that come up. If everything's in red, wait, pause. This isn't seemingly going well. We need to make some changes, and we think about what's best and what's an option for us. Finally, here, I think there's also like internal stakeholder factors, and so that's just like how families are feeling and how staff are feeling about the year, how things are going, their well-being, their success, their challenges, and taking that into consideration as all of these factors then come into play in guiding decisions moving forward. And so that's where we are now in beginning to kind of codify what represents sound decisions moving forward. And so I guess with that, Sarah or Janet, did I miss anything or anything worth reiterating here based on our discussion on Wednesday?
No, I think you covered it at a high level.
So I think the question then is where do we go from here? Like we continue to monitor external factors and see what other people are doing and just take that into consideration. We gauge how we're doing as a school across these internal performance factors, and we'll survey families this fall to see how things are going 6 weeks into school to hear about where they feel good, where challenges may exist, where they have concerns, and then look to troubleshoot.
Yeah, I think one thing that probably makes sense for you to be prepared for is that at some point different kids are going to need different things, and that's hard to do remote. And I don't have a solid answer as to how you address it, but it does seem like, I mean, my guess is you're going to need to bring some kids in that just can't do well from home for a variety of reasons. Discipline and parents aren't there and they're just not paying attention and whatever, or it's just preference, or they would do better with a grown-up around or whatever. But I just think you're going to need to think about, like, how do you differentiate your offering and kind of customize it to the extent you can for the population you're serving. And I think you're doing some one-on-ones and small groups and things like that remote already.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's an area that I would like to think about more, and I would like to know you guys are thinking about more, because it just one size fits all is just going to be impossible to administer. I mean, it's going to be possible to administer, but I don't think it's going to be very effective.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's differentiation remotely. And then there's like, we've tried every differentiating tool that like is in our arsenal remotely, and we now have to think about perhaps something in person and create a safe space in doing so.
Yeah, and just because, you may well find that something works great for 90% of the kids, and, that's not great on your chart here, but if it's perfect for 90% and you have a different solution that works for the other 10, then that's a good combo, right? So I just can't, it's hard to predict what's going to happen.
Yep. The other next step, so I think what you just raised, Marianne, reminded me of what we also quickly discussed on Wednesday, that's one, is sort of like thinking about differentiation. That's going to come up. And then the other is just, so at some point in time, it's going to be safe to return to school, like full on. And so having a transition plan drafted is important. I've begun thinking about that, but haven't drafted anything formally yet. And so that I see as a next step in the coming month or two.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think with that is the strategic planning going on right now for 2021.
Okay, that's a lot of planning. Committees, I think you said.
Yeah, let's see if she's on. Let me check the participation list. Let me get
Yeah, I don't see.
She must be here. She's on here. 56. Let me see if she emailed me. She did. Hi, Josh. She says. Oh, okay. Let me email her again.
Otherwise, we can start with a different committee.
Yep. Yep. Okay, cool. I think what we ought to do is we ought to move on to a different committee, and this is going to be brief. We talked much about what was discussed at the committee level anyway, but that might be the best use of time. So I guess DFC is next.
We don't have anyone though, right? Or
I think I did speak with Sal. As I mentioned, Jim and Jake have had other things this past week. So in speaking with Sal, I think a lot of the work is in progress. So we'll talk a bit more about like some of the recent proposals from the developer about the possibility of a purchase of our building. It's very kind of early. And there's just some considerations happening offline about whether that's even viable. So I think having Jake back next month makes sense to maybe think about that as a full board more so.
Yeah.
And then I think tax abatement is still in process. And beyond that, I had mentioned just some of the fundraising updates in the school leader report, and it's still early. So I think nothing that needs to come to the full board as a formal discussion tonight from the DFC. With the ECPC, we didn't meet this week, and so I think there was a drop ball on my end, and then there was a proposal to meet yesterday, and we didn't. But the work right now has been twofold. One is sort of like board recruitment, and so Earl is now completing paperwork on his end, and should have something in form and ready to submit. He is waiting right now for one document, which may take some time to get. So one thought I had was to have him participate as a non-voting participant.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. It's open to the public. So.
Yeah. So I'd like to do that next month with Earl and have him in. And then there are a couple of initiatives going on. One that is exciting. We piloted a program last year where we had volunteers helping individual students with their college essay writing and their personal statements. And it was like, for a volunteer, powerful work because they could kind of like have an impact on an individual kid in a matter of a few hours and helping them improve their essay. And then they will connect too. And then it was helpful to a kid. So we're continuing with that now and have some associate board members taking part in that and then recruiting others to take part. So that's going on at the sort of community engagement level. And I think those are the big updates I'd put forward from the ECPC committee. From an SLC standpoint, Jeanette or Sarah, is there anything else? I think we covered most everything that we discussed.
Yeah, we've hit on everything at this point.
And I think from there, associate board members, no one's here. So
is Leslie joining or not?
Let me check the email again. But I think what we can do is we can move on to board approvals, given that we do have quorum.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Although I really do think it's just one item because we don't need to approve anything.
No, I think with Sarah, it's just what we've done in the past and having it be just a topic of discussion and
noted.
item. So it's here just to formalize it.
All right, so let's do the minutes from the August meeting. Anyone have any comments? No? All in favor? All right. And then, Sarah, do you want to say something before you go, or?
Well, this has been a great experience. I've learned a lot. Thank you for inviting me into the Unity community. And I know that the next charter term is going to be even greater.
What, if you don't mind, what are you off to do? Are you staying in an area or moving on to something different? Or?
Yeah, so I'm shifting kind of career-wise, focus-wise. I'm going to be a worker owner at a bookkeeping workers co-op that is focused on like small social justice nonprofits.
Cool.
So I'm learning a lot about workers co-ops.
All right. And that's in the city still, or is it like multi?
It's like based in the city, but at this point,
everywhere. Yeah.
It's all remote, so.
Very cool.
Leslie did write that.
We'll miss you. Have we talked about a board composition? Because we're going to be down to 7 next month, right? And I know we kind of always talk about who we should get on the board, but I don't know, Sarah, if you have any thoughts about people who might be good, or if Josh has already started thinking about it, because I think, I don't know how long it's going to take to get anyone on the board, but we have room, right? We've never been at 7, I don't think, or at least not in years, and we've probably been at 10 sometimes, right? So we have room for good people.
Yeah. I think hopefully everything works out with Earl and he joins the team. And then I did hear, I corresponded with Lenny this weekend. There was a feature in the Times this weekend on Brooklyn Hospital, and just like that's going on there. And so he was one of the core people featured. And so
cool.
I wrote him and said, "Hey, congrats, you're a hero." And he wrote back and said, "The paperwork's done." And so Lenny may be also back
that'd be great.
for a busy few months. So yeah, there are a couple of other folks that kind of come to mind, and so we'll see what's out there and try to fill Sarah's big shoes. So I think with that, Leslie is back in. Leslie, sorry for some of the hardships with getting on.
What was that about? Yeah.
No.
She's in the tropics, that's why.
Must be the reception on that fancy island you're on.
Yeah.
I only wish. Believe you and me. I might be afraid to get on a plane, but I wish I was. Sorry about that, you guys. I was trying at 7:45. I gave up, and then Josh was like, "Hey, where are you?" I said, "All right, I'll try again."
All right, well, thank you.
Yep. So, are you guys ready for me now?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. I guess as I was communicating to the finance committee last week, this is only 1 month of financials. There really wasn't a whole lot of movement. And because we're still tackling with, things like audit or whatever, which is taking a lot, I feel it's taking a lot longer, not just with Unity, but pretty much with all of our clients, because we're all remote, we're all in different areas. We're trying to pull information together that we may not have electronically. Things I feel like is going at a snail's pace. We're making a lot of progress, but we're going at a snail's pace. So with that being said, I put together a report that was probably a little different from what you're normally seeing without all of the information. And we're also thinking about revamping the report a little also. And this will probably affect Josh more than probably the finance committee meeting, the finance committee, where it's a little bit more concise and it's easier to read. So with that being said, we should have something different that's probably more than what you're used to seeing next month. So to move on to how we're looking currently for July, as I said, there really isn't that much movement. We're expecting higher revenues for the full year right now with only 1 month of data is projected to be about $15,000 higher. And that's because from the time we did the budget to where we are now, we received a more updated or revised allocation number for title. So the title budget that the state has given us now is roughly about $8,900 higher than what was budgeted. We also received some contributions through Benevity, which is about $6,000. So that's how we get to the $15,000 where we're higher. All of the revenues right now, because we don't know any better, are pretty much staying on budget. However, we do know that we were granted an ESSER grant of about $165,000. And that has not been distributed to us yet, and we don't know when that's going to be distributed. As we were going through the application phase, we worked with Josh and his team to determine how we were going to spend that $165,000. About roughly $50,000 of it is going to computers. A portion of it is going for things like PPE and additional cleaning supplies when the students are allowed back into the school. And the rest of it is pretty much going for additional salaries for personnel there who will be handling various different, stages of wellness for the students. And Josh could probably speak to that a little bit more. So
like the coordination of our safe spaces for online learning, the coordination of a Saturday enrichment program, those kinds of stipends is really what it is.
Right. So that'll probably all be implemented into the next report, because we have to decide, what teachers are going to be doing these type of trainings, so that we make sure that when we put in the revenue, we're also associating the expenses in the correct account, so that they pretty much zero each other out. Because the ESSER loan is pretty much working kind of like the title loan. So as you spend the money, as you incur the money, then they'll reimburse you for those funds back. But however, we don't know when they're going to disperse the money, and if they're going to do it as you spend it, or if they're going to do the first 20%, the way they do the way they do title. So I'm sure there's more to come with that. Mm-hmm. Are there any questions on revenue?
I wanted to ask something. Are those dollars that go into Friends of or Unity?
They're going to Unity. The ESSER funds? Yeah, that's Unity.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
and then I don't know if you were going to touch on this, but what's our plan with the PPP loan? I assume the money just sits there, and then if we don't spend it by year end because we don't have the right buckets of expenditures, then it goes back. Is that the general plan? And sort of what's our process around it? Like who's making the decisions? Who's advising? Like how are we thinking about it?
I'm not quite sure who's making the decisions. I know that we're looking into putting together the financials that are needed, let's say, for forgiveness. And when I say putting together the financials, it's like we've determined that out of the $1.5 million or roughly $1.6 million that were received, how are we spending that money, right? So there's a certain
amount. We're not spending it, right?
We're not spending it, but if we're asking for forgiveness, one of the things that we're being told in our organization is that we have to have certain financials that kind of like say how many payroll periods were used, or the 8 weeks, because we're taking the 8-week frame. Of those 8 weeks, how many payrolls were used for that $1.5 million, right? And after we've exhausted all of the salaries, what else can we throw into, not throw into the dollar, but what else will make up the additional funds? So we're looking at things like, well, we can't use rent, right? Because rent is something that is being, that we're getting reimbursed for through the facility assistance. We have to look at things like maybe utilities and other things in the school to try to close the gap on that $1.6 million.
Yeah, let's try to have a detailed report on that for the next AFC. I think that would be very helpful to look through.
Okay, and to
unless there's a decision to be made before then, but I think we ought to. This needs a lot of thought and a lot of consideration before.
Right, and from what I understand, Marion, a lot of the information may be coming from the banker. So whoever has a relationship with the banker, they may be able to get, information in regards to forgiveness on that. I can provide you with how we can tag that information for PPP, but as far as the decision making and who's talking to the banker, I
understand that, and I think the decision making is going to have to be with the board, and Josh and
yeah,
right.
But in the same way, I mean, you guys, we leaned on you pretty hard on the application front and like making some decisions there about whether to, and then what the rationale was for doing it. And so nothing changes here. There's nothing going on that doesn't happen at the AFC and board level moving forward. And I think it's just, we sit and kind of like, hopefully we don't experience any unknowns or any uncertainties over the next several months, but like we just continue to forge ahead with our programming and hope that doesn't happen. And I think if something does happen, then we revisit like whether this is something which applies to some of that funding.
Yeah, but I'd like to have a discussion at the next AFC to make sure we still have our eye on the ball and we all agree on what the path forward is.
So we'll include that at the AFC level next in October. That makes sense.
So I'll have a breakdown of the expenses that qualify for PPP.
Okay.
And if we are within the threshold or not.
And whoever's talking to this mysterious banker who seems to know all about it could probably just brief us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In regards to expenses right now are projected to be roughly about $10,000 higher. And that was due to some incentives that were paid for maternity leave benefits, which was about $3,600. And I also factored into miscellaneous expense, the PPP loan interest, and that comes to about $6,700. Okay. So I didn't want to not have anything in there and just give us the false hope that those expenses may not come to fruition. Yep. So I just put in the 6 months. And then all the other expenses right now are expected to be on budget. So full year right now is projected to be higher than budget by roughly $4,447, and that's preliminary.
Okay.
It's very preliminary, and then I think we talked about, as we did early on, the big sort of factors here, which will come into play in October with our first billing, will be enrollment and special education enrollment.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
at some point, our budget is enrollment, percentage of special ed, and breakdown of comp on the other side, right?
So
And that's
80% of things. Yeah.
yeah.
And something else that I want to mention, which will give an influx of cash, right? We just found out probably on either Thursday or Friday, and that usually the normal Senate allocation that we get from per pupil, that's based on a certain enrollment. We had thought at one point that maybe we were not going to receive this money because of COVID and the 20% budget. Come to find out, they have allocated money to charters. And the way that's being calculated, it's being calculated at $195.45 per student as of February 1st. We were able to calculate that we have 534 students, and that should give the school roughly $104,370. So in regards for audit, right, we're going to book that as a receivable so that that revenue will be recognized for last year. Hence, we'll have the cash this year.
Okay, so it's something that we thought that we were supposed to get last year, that we thought we weren't going to get, but it turns out we're going to get it. The cash is just going to come in the next period. Okay.
Right.
All right,
Yep.
got it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't see that $104,000 on anything that I present this year in regards on a revenue basis, but you'll see it, in our cash. Yep, you got it. So just to talk about cash on hand. So we have roughly cash on hand, about 63 days of cash on hand. That does not include anything with the PPP loan. And FOMB cash on hand is roughly $1.1 million.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Leslie.
Anything else?
Nope. That's it. If there's anything else that was coming down the pike, I'd let you know, but I don't know right now.
All right.
All right.
Have a good night now.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. So I think that leaves us public comment, and I don't see any public that would be here to comment. So I don't know if anybody else wants to make comments. Otherwise, last thoughts and board meeting assessment. I don't know if Josh, you have any last thoughts? But
no, I think there'll be a lot more information to share out next meeting because we'll have some real data on how things are going. I imagine having some more insights into the renewal process for the coming year and what that might look like. And so there'll be some discussion on that. And
that'll be due, what, a year from now?
Yeah, August and October.
August.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So those are things kind of in the works right now. So I see the next meeting being more information driven. And then us probably having some more information on just general society and things, and utilizing that factor analysis document in practice.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't have much else. I just think it feels like this was a little off for a bunch of reasons because, we're missing a lot of people and we're missing a lot of information because we just started. So, it's just with 4 more weeks under our belt or however much it's going to be, we probably should have a better discussion next month, and we should hold our committees in person and everything else. I mean, not in person, but in Zoom person.
Yep.
Next month.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I guess maybe one other point would be just that Mario and I may reach out to folks from the AFC if there's some clarity on contract with CSBM. So that's sort of like
this came to my mind as Leslie was speaking, and I think I'm missing a couple data points on where we're even going with that. Are we trying to staff up, or are we just going with?
I think it makes more sense to go that route, assuming that a couple of final pieces are in play, and we've got a clear understanding on what's expected of us internally and what is not expected of us. And so Chris has been back and forth with Chris has been back and forth with back and forth with Karen and with Karen. Back and forth with Karen and with Karen.
It looks like there's some feedback on the line. It's kind of playing. It looks like there's some feedback on the line. It's kind of playing. Why don't you and Chris give me even a quick call to let me know? I mean, not right now, but between now and the end of the week to let me know where we are.
Yeah.
And then we can decide what to do, because I think our contract is up, right?
It's monthly right now, but once we move into then a form of full year, it will convert to that.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, we should do that.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Have a good one. Take care, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
We'll miss you, Sarah.
Mhm.
Oh,
Good luck.
Sarah.
Mhm.
oh.
Good
Good
night.
luck.
Yeah.